Hello, hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. So today our session, this is our bi-weekly session and career session. The goal for this session is to talk about different careers. We'll have different speakers on every week. And today our topic is going to be careers in consulting / advisory with a focus in business operations and investment banking, because we have two professionals who are both working in the consulting and advisory space, and now they're respectively working in business operations and investment banking. My name is Zohaib Kumar. I'll be the moderator today. So let's start with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And what I wanted to do is turn it over to our two guests today, Nabil and Faizan, to introduce themselves, share a fun fact about themselves, and I'll start with Nabil first. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, really nice to be here. My name is Nabil, as Zohaib mentioned. I work today in business operations and strategy at a tech company called Deliver that's based in San Francisco. Beforehand, I worked at a consulting firm called Oliver Wyman out of their New York offices. Fun fact about me, I'm Canadian. I grew up in Canada. I grew up in a town called Mississauga. I live in Kitchener nowadays. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. And Faizan?
Hey, assalamu alaikum. I'm Faizan. I graduated from Binghamton University. I started my career at Ernst & Young within their consulting practice, their M&A practice. Now I work at MUFG Bank of Tokyo in their investment banking division. I guess fun fact about me, I grew up in Valley Stream. I've been coming to Masjid Hamza since I was little.
Perfect.
My earliest memories. I don't know if that's a fun fact, but it was a pretty fun time for me.
No, it's a good fact. All right, perfect. So what I thought we would do is talk a little bit about consulting advisory at a high level. A lot of people see these terms thrown out there. Oh, I'm an advisor. Oh, that person's working in advisory. That company is doing an advisory role for this. Can you speak to a little bit about what is advisory? What is consulting? What is this practice that's out there? And what do these terms mean, consulting and advisory? So I'll let Nabil take the first stab at that.
Yeah, I think it really differs on the type of I think there's like a common, phrase that everyone says, like, I work in consulting, and it's really difficult to understand like what that is. And it means different things in different types of industries. There are different types of companies that cover what consulting does. I think like the way I can answer that is segment that into a couple different types of consulting firms. So there's kind of like your traditional kind of like strategic or management consulting firms. So there's like a consulting practice there. You have consulting firms that are more boutique, that focus on specific industries or specific kind of areas within those industries. So like IT consulting, retail consulting that are more specific. Then there's consulting and advisory practices that kind of bridge the gap between those traditional kind of business consulting practices and include like engineering consulting and so on. So I can speak to what I did, which is working in management consulting. And so specifically management consulting works on advising normally Fortune 500 larger clients on, any part of strategic issues that they have at the C-suite, at more of an operational level, just across their entire business, advising strategic projects and helping to kind of, one, provide guidance on a specific business problem that they're facing, and then two, working on actually implementing and creating a solution to that issue. So,
Nabil, why don't we stop there? Just because we're going to keep it
okay,
high
got it.
right now.
Yep.
And then I'll turn it over to Faizan. Do you want to share from your experience what you think advisory consulting means to you, and a little bit about the type of advisory that you used to do?
Was that for me or for Nabil? Oh, okay.
Yes, for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Nabil kind of hit it on the head. It's kind of a very general term. Consulting can mean many different things. And, ultimately it just boils down to assisting organizations or parts of organizations as an external third party. So you're kind of coming not as an employee of the company, but you're contracted as a part, like external help to assist them with maybe if they're trying to undertake a new initiative, or they're going through a transformation, or maybe they have some initiative that they're trying to test out, or if there's like trouble in the company and you're trying to assist them and pinpoint exactly what that trouble is. So I guess for me specifically, the type of consulting I was working in was specific to M&A. So anytime a company was undergoing a transaction, we would help them with the physical integration of that transaction. So ensuring that, company A and company B can kind of fit and move forward once they close the deal process, because, it's a big risk when you're going through deals, is not being able to kind of move forward as one organization.
Perfect. That's really good, guys. Thank you. And I'll throw out my 2 cents. What I've always heard about advisory consulting at a high level is you're solving problems for companies without being an employee of the company. They're hiring an outside company to come in, and you would be an employee of that company potentially. And then you're going to come in and help solve some type of problem for them. So that's a very, very basic explanation or definition that I've heard. So let's start with like somebody, let's say, they like what you guys said. They're like, I want to do what you do, Nabil. I want to do what you do, Faizan. I want to get into consulting advisory. What do you have to do to get into that field from an educational perspective? Do you have to go to college? Is there another route out of high school you can do? Can you guys shed some light on your own paths and what you've seen? Nabil first.
Sure. Yeah, I can kick things off. So overall, high level, I think you do need to attend university or have some kind of significant credential there. In terms of what program that you need to study, again, it depends on the type of consulting that you want to do. If you want to go into general management consulting like I did, you can study really anything across the board, across any subject. So there are consultants who come in from engineering backgrounds like myself. I studied engineering as my undergraduate degree. I studied systems design engineering, which is kind of like industrial engineering. But I've seen, people from different engineering backgrounds go into consulting, art, history, political science. Like it doesn't really matter. The objective of many of these management consulting firms is to just hire kind of folks with high GPAs that have extracurricular activities and have leadership acumen to join their firm. And depending on kind of like your area of study, you'll bring something unique to the table that is valuable at the management consulting firm that you're working for. Yeah, so that's a very high level.
Perfect. Faizan, what are your thoughts on, what's the career path, educational path for somebody who wants to get into consulting? And is there a specific major you can check the box and say, I want to become a consultant? I want to major in consulting and check that box.
Yeah. I think Nabil honestly hit the nail on the head with this question. There's not a consulting major in college. There's not a specific degree that you need. I know a lot of times people harp on, I need to study XYZ, or I need to be in this program. But I think, Nabil, without getting into the different tiers of consulting and what types of schools you need to go to, I think it's just important to go to a university, and in your time at that university to showcase that, through your extracurriculars or through your classes or through your projects, that, you exemplify the qualifications that make a good management consultant or make a good consultant, whether that's, your problem solving skills as an engineer with the projects that you do, the capstones that you do, or, working with teams. If you're on, if you're in different organizations, you undertake different initiatives. It, really shows the consulting firm that you're recruiting for that you can work on a team. And ultimately, consulting is a very collaborative career. So at least for me, anecdotally, I saw that most people who were going into consulting had some type of, they really stood out in terms of their extracurriculars. They had, maybe some charity that they ran, or they were a part of organizations on campus that really highlighted, how they worked on teams.
Perfect. So I'll turn it to Faizan first. What are your thoughts on, do you have to go for a master? So some people, they have the thought from people that they've spoken to or things they've seen on TV where a lot of these guys get an MBA and then they go get a top level job. Do you have to get an MBA or a master's right after you graduate to be able to get into some of these firms? Some of these firms I've heard are pretty exclusive to get into. It's hard. You can't just go from any school with any GPA and get into them. So Faizan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you absolutely do not need an MBA straight from college to get into these programs. So I guess an MBA is useful for specific career paths, maybe within engineering or maybe within, I can't really speak to the other career paths that it's relevant for, but an MBA, well, I can't speak for where a master's is relevant, but an MBA specifically, at least at the top schools, or just at least in general, an MBA, what it's used for is it's used to pivot. It was primarily used for scientists and engineers in order for them to pivot to more business related roles. And so let's say, you spent the first 4 or 5 years of your life as a, I don't know, construction engineer, or working in a field that was unrelated to business, and you kind of had no open door to working at a corporation. An MBA kind of gives you a second chance at, maybe the school that I went to was very engineering focused, and we didn't have companies like McKinsey or BCG or Oliver Wyman or EY Park. We didn't have companies like the consulting companies come to our school. So an MBA is kind of just a second chance at being able to, go through the recruiting process again. And usually people go into these MBA programs with a set career in mind. So it can be an engineer or someone who works in oil and gas who wants to shift to consulting. They'll get an MBA, and that'll allow them to kind of rebrand themselves, and give them, it's essentially a launching pad. And you don't need that straight from college. Like if that you want to do consulting, let's say freshman year, sophomore year, even junior year of college, if you're recruiting for that and if you're doing internships for that, you can get a job straight out of college. That's not to say that, with an MBA, you can't get it. You can get it too, but I don't even think the top MBA programs, kind of take, like, it's very traditional for you to do undergrad and then to work for a few years, get that experience, and then go to get your MBA. The average age for your MBA is I think it's 26 to 28 or something like that. It's not even, if you're applying straight from school, you can get in, but you're not going to get into, like Harvard, Yale, schools like NYU Stern, like a lot of these places, they kind of require you to have, work experience in order to go there. I don't know.
Perfect. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, Faizan. Nabil, do you want to share any of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would just echo what Faizan said. I completely agree that you don't need to have an MBA to apply for these firms and to get in. So the firms are pretty competitive no matter where you are applying to get one of these roles. So oftentimes it's better coming out of college, if you don't end up getting a role like that, to go into whatever industry that you're passionate about, whatever role, and then use your MBA to kind of again go through the recruiting process. So that's one stream, and then you can reapply as an MBA candidate who has more experience coming into a consulting firm.
Perfect. We have a question that came in, so I'll throw it out to you guys, and Faizan will go first. What are your thoughts on working for consultants or having your own firm? So, going your own consulting route, and I guess being a sole practitioner or working with others to create your own company, versus working for one of these big consulting firms that are out there. So Faizan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a question with a lot of nuance. If you have a specific niche area that people are willing to pay you for to provide advice, then why not go and be your own boss, kind of open up your own firm. Because when you're working at a consulting firm, it's the consulting firm that's kind of negotiating the rate at which you're working at. But when you're working for yourself, then you're negotiating your own rate. So there's no overhead that's being taken by the consulting firm. You're kind of just taking that yourself. But there's a lot of challenges too. If you're your own consultant, you kind of have to do all the sourcing yourself and find clients. Frankly, if you're not good at your job, you're not going to get people to hire you. It's a very nuanced question. You have to have some type of niche experience that people are willing to pay you to kind of help them out with. I'm probably not qualified to answer this question because I've been working at large companies my whole life. I don't really have, I don't think anyone would pay me individually to do something. But that's, I don't know what, I guess those are my thoughts.
Nabil, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say if you have an expertise that someone's going to pay you to advise them on, go for it. But that's not going to be the case for a lot of people coming out of undergrad. Certainly wasn't the case for me. The reason why I think you want to work for a consulting firm is because of the infrastructure, the training opportunity, the learning opportunities available to you. And so the value proposition of a consulting firm is you come out of college, you enter a firm that kind of gives you exposure to many different clients, hopefully many different industries, and allow you to kind of try different things as a consultant in different projects so that you can learn about the specific areas. And then most people kind of exit between the 2-3 year mark and head other places. In terms of like starting your own firm, there are opportunities once you like go through consulting, work at a firm and learn a specific area and develop that niche, that you could provide those services yourself. Other ways to get there are like doing an MBA, doing a PhD in a specific area, and then you can be brought on. But yeah, completely different kind of like objectives going to a consulting firm versus doing your own thing.
Okay, perfect. So we had a follow-up question from that same questioner. And they said they were asking in relation to direct liability versus non-direct. I'm not familiar with those terms in relation to consulting. I don't know if you guys have anything you can share upon that, or you need more information to answer that question.
Yeah,
Nabil?
I can't really touch on that.
Faizan?
Yeah, that's a very, I think there's layers to that question. I'm not prepared to answer.
Okay, perfect. So if the questioner wants to reword the question or get into more nuance or clarify the question further, but right now we would say we don't have the expertise to touch that specific topic, so we'll hold off on that. Thank you for the questions. So let's keep going. We talked a little bit about, how do you get into this field? First route is you have to go to college, right? And then are there any unique programs? And then you guys said do extracurricular activities, try to get leadership positions, try to do something unique that would stand out, have a good GPA. Those are the basics. Is there anything else you want to add to that for people who are interested in getting into the field of advisory and consulting that they can do in college to help them get ahead? I'll do Faizan first.
Yeah, sure. Am I muted, or can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Anything you can do to get ahead. Honestly, I think the first thing that you should do is kind of understand where your own strengths are, because there's a certain type of personality or there's a certain type of skill set that's necessary for consulting, or that you would thrive as a consultant, I guess. It's not really for everyone. Some people kind of like working in a silo, working by themselves, and getting their work done and then kind of clocking out. Whereas consulting is it's very team oriented. It's very collaborative, and if that's something that you're naturally inclined to, then I guess that goes into the question what you can do to get yourself ahead. See if your college campus has some type of consulting club or some type of case competition that kind of goes on. It's a great supplement to an internship. So a lot of times people feel like they're in this conundrum where I can't get an internship, and because I can't get an internship, I can't get a full-time job. But there's a lot of things that you can do on campus that don't require the application process, or that don't require you to get an internship in order for you to put on your resume. So certain classes sometimes have case competitions as a supplement, and case competitions is as close as you can get to what real life consulting work is, whereas you're given a problem for an organization, a company or a bank or whatever it may be. You're working with the team to put together materials, put together a presentation on a solution for that, and then you present it. And sometimes it's a competition. It's in it's kind of in the structure of a competition, and if you place well, you can post that on your resume. If you don't place well, you can still post it on your resume. You just, I guess, leave off the bullet of where you ranked. But that can serve as a great it can serve as a great experience, and can serve as a great talking point when you're applying to these companies. Because if your only experience is kind of working retail, or I don't know, not to take away from any of the cultural organizations, if your only experience is the Muslim student organization, or working retail, you can't really, it's kind of hard to draw parallels with what that work is with consulting. It's easier to kind of show that story of, oh, I was interested in consulting because of this class, or because of this project, or because of this club. I was exposed to XYZ, and that's why I want to work in consulting.
Perfect. Nabil, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that what they're looking for is achievement in academics, your internships, and the quality of the work that you've done in your internships, or the extracurricular piece. And so apart from the other two, like in terms of extracurriculars, case competitions, getting involved in your consulting club, just like Faizan mentioned, those are the best ways to go about it. Other cool things that you can try out are just like any activity or initiative or cause that you are really that you value, and championing that and doing something at scale. Like I think they're just looking for things that you're doing that are impressive and that show leadership and that show kind of the ability to do something impactful. And so, one example that I know of someone who worked at a firm was they started a charitable organization where they were gathered like a great deal of donations, and that really made them stand out in their applications. So just doing things that are against the grain, that show your ability and acumen.
Perfect. So another question that I was thinking about is, for people, some fields like accounting, you get a CPA exam that you can pass. You can get that certification. In IT, there are different types of certifications. In consulting, is there anything like that, the equivalent of that you can work towards? I know, Faizan, you have some parts of your CFA exam passed. Is there any advice you can share for people who are like, I want to do something different? Can I get something on my resume, like a certification that will make me stand out? So I'll start off with Faizan first.
Yeah, sure. So to answer this question, I'm kind of going to go back to Nabil when he's introducing consulting. So there's a lot of different types of consulting. People kind of throw that term out for a lot. It encompasses a lot of different career paths, and certain types of consultants, I would say, maybe it is required to have some type of, IT certification or Amazon Web Services or whatever it may be. For general management consulting, or for general where you're helping the organization with, I don't know, strategic initiatives, you don't really need any type of certification. I mean, a CPA, CFA, like you can take that for your own supplement, but it's not gonna, move the needle too much for these consulting firms. If anything, it'll show that, okay, this person is smart enough to take these tests, but it's not like they're gonna pick someone who has a CPA. Well, it depends on the firm. It depends on the consulting again, but if it's like general management consulting, I don't think it's too much of a needle turner.
Nabil, your thoughts?
So one thing I noticed is a trend in general, at least at the firm that I was at, and maybe across industries, is that having some kind of like programming or coding skills comes in handy. And maybe not as much in like actually getting recruited, but in the actual job, it helps you excel as well. It might have a component of helping you get recruited. Reason being is that, so in general, if we think about like consulting, a lot of the time there are, at least the projects that I was getting looped into, a requirement for someone to have like at least some advanced programming skills. So you're still working on problem solving and tackling general problems, but having the ability to code helps, I think. So yeah, like even if you're not in like an engineering or STEM background, taking programming courses online, there's thousands of sources like Code Academy or Coursera or something like that. I think it helps.
That's perfect. Thank you. And I think that's true for a lot of fields, even in accounting, business, general fields. The more IT background you have, you can do a little bit of coding. On our previous sessions, we've talked to other professionals, and they've said the same thing. It can go a long way. The next question I wanted to cover was, what's it like to work when you guys were in consulting? What was it like on a day-to-day basis to work in consulting, just to give people a feel for what it's like on a day-to-day basis? So I'll start with Nabil first.
Yeah, I can talk about some of the projects that I had and then what the day-to-day for those projects were like. One of the projects that I worked on was help advising a big telecoms company on their video product. So they have like a TV subscription that they would have in their offering, and they were losing a lot of customers because not a lot of people have cable TV anymore. They turned to Netflix. And so essentially the whole problem that we were trying to solve was that there were a lot of people disconnecting, and when they disconnected, the company's solution was to basically pay them credits to stay. And so you call in, picture yourself wanting to cancel your cable subscription. You call in, you say, hey, listen, I don't really like this cable. And instead of canceling or instead of like letting you cancel right away, the company will offer you credits, like $50 off your monthly bill, $40. So my entire project was helping to basically define what the optimal amount of credits you have to get to retain any given customer, therefore limiting the overall spend that you have on credits and retaining the most customers that you can out of like a dying product. So day to day, what did that look like? So in terms of kind of the actual work that I was doing, we would basically have deliverables that we have a consulting engagement. The consulting firm has basically had a contract signed with the client that basically says we need to develop a recommendation by X date. And then working backwards from that date, we had kind of in between meetings where we would share our analyses on, this is our initial recommendation, this is the additional work that we'll be doing, so on. These are called steering committee meetings. And so prior to that, in terms of my day-to-day, it was helping to create the analysis in terms of actually the code that we would use to model out different scenarios of credit spend and how well they work on retaining given customers. So I actually built like the actual Excel models that go into that, then presenting that analysis. So creating slides that would go into a presentation that would be shared by our senior folks to the senior members on the client side. That's really like the day-to-day you kind of have on a really micro level. Like day-to-day, you're basically having meetings, catching up 2-3 times a day with your manager to talk about the outputs from your analysis that you're working on. That's kind of how it works. From like a non-work perspective, I was on a fly out, fly in schedule. So I would fly into the client site on Monday mornings. I would catch like a 6 a.m. flight, fly out to the client site. And then Thursday mornings, I would fly back to my home city, which was New York City at the time. So there's like a travel component to it, which is a big part of consulting, or can be a big part of consulting.
Perfect. Thank you. Faizan, do you want to share your experience on a day-to-day basis in consulting?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way that Nabil kind of described it, even though there's different types of consulting projects, it sounds like his was a little more specific to, I guess, one initiative or one part of the organization. Ultimately, your role is kind of the same, where you're doing an analysis, you're digesting the analysis, you're putting it together in a presentation form and kind of presenting what you found. And so, yeah, that's kind of what my experience was too. So the types of I guess, the same format of Nabil's answer. One of the projects I worked on was, it was a clothing brand company that was looking to sell off its denim wear, one of its denim wear units. So same thing as Nabil, it was a fly in, fly out project. Monday mornings, I would fly into the headquarters. I was in charge of basically assessing all of the one-time costs that the different departments had, so that I can kind of see what the total costs were associated with that denim brand. Basically, kind of trying to strip out that denim brand from the entire organization. And in order to do that, I needed to speak with the head of supply chain, the head of marketing, the head of, the general counsel. So there was a lot of, interaction. There was a lot of, working with different personalities and kind of getting information from them. And, no two people have the same work style. You kind of, have to adapt yourself. And so I guess ultimately it really depends on what type of consulting you're doing. And that kind of, leads to what type of work you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I guess mine was more organizational, and that's why I was kind of working across the organization, as opposed to, some people work in tech consulting where they only work with the tech department, or they work in finance consulting where they only work with finance and accounting. So it really all depends on what type of consulting you're doing.
Perfect. No, thank you guys. That's really helpful to kind of see what it's like to work in the field, because many of us see things on TV, movies, and it's not doesn't link up with what reality is like. Any advice for people who are interested in this field to get internships, their first step into the job? I know we talked about participating in different organizations, that there are challenges out there. Anything unique about getting internships at some of the bigger firms in the consulting space? I'll turn it to Faizan first.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest advice that I can give to people, or prospective students, would be reach out to people on LinkedIn. Reach out to people in order of what your network consists of. So if there's someone within your Masjid community or your family friends who work in consulting, reach out to them and ask them about it. Ask them to, ask them frank questions. What are their day-to-day? How did they get in? And if they're not working in the specific field that you want to, then maybe they can introduce you to someone else who does, and there's so many people out there that, in asking or in making that request, the worst thing that can happen is that they don't respond. If they do respond, great. You've got another connection who can kind of fill that information gap of, what you want to do in your life. And once you build out your network, once you build, speaking to people, these are the people who can, kind of put roles in front of you and kind of put, oh, we have an opening at our company for an internship, you should apply. And, it's people like that. It's people in positions like that who kind of, really are the inflection points in your career. And I guess that would be my advice in terms of prospective students trying to get internships. Obviously, trying to be as active as you can on campus so that you kind of set yourself apart, because there's so many people who are applying for these internships. Everyone has above a 3.5, above a 3.8. Like that's, sitting in your room and studying and getting good grades doesn't set you apart. What sets you apart is the initiatives that you take. Just like Nabil mentioned, he had, an anecdote about someone who started a charity. You don't have to, do something for the specific intention of this will lead me to an internship. Just busy yourself with things that you think will give you the skill set that are relevant for the roles that you want. So that consulting, the skill sets are working as a team, or I don't know, being a self-starter. Try to join organizations that kind of bring that out in you. If that's not a skill that you have, then that's even better. You're starting from zero. When I was in college, I wasn't the best public speaker. I used to stutter a lot. I used to have anxiety when I go up and make presentations, and it wasn't that I wanted to go in consulting, and that's why. I was really embarrassed about my own public speaking. I went out of my way to join Toastmasters and to join all these organizations to kind of get out of my comfort zone and kind of develop that as a skill. So college is the time where you're developing these skills, and you're at the best part of your life to start somewhere from zero. There's no, it's a lot easier to start from zero and build yourself up in college as opposed to when you're like 30 or 40. So I guess that's my advice.
Perfect. Thank you. Nabil?
Yeah, so in terms of kind of internship advice, I would completely, mimic what Faison said, which is, talking about doing things that you're actually passionate about, staying busy, and that helps you kind of push into different ways to develop yourself and stand out. I would agree that kind of grades are only just one part of the equation here to landing an internship. And so tactically, one strategy that worked well for me, I actually was in a co-op program. And so I had a chance to do many internships before I actually started full-time. But even in the internships that you have available to you before you start college, first year, second year, third year, some tips I think help out are trying to push within some of these organizations that have a consulting practice, but in a different area. And that's, so I worked originally at Deloitte within an internal kind of planning and strategy office. And then from there, in my next internship, I transitioned horizontally into their consulting practice there. So that was helpful because when I joined in another division, I had internal access to the company. I knew exactly who were in these different positions. I reached out to them, had coffees. That was a way that I kind of strategized. The other way is attending kind of once you're kind of in the sphere of consulting or whatever industry that you're aiming for, attending events and networking sessions within that sphere, and just genuinely wanting to learn more about other firms do, what other practices do. So I would attend kind of consulting. At the time I was interning in Toronto, and so there are consulting industry events within Toronto, and then there are fun recreational events where some of the big four firms would face each other in soccer and just getting involved in that and meeting with people in other firms. So yeah, those are a couple pieces of advice I would give.
Perfect. No, thank you guys. That's really helpful. We did give a question that came in, so I'll turn it over to you guys. This question: are there any active openings that this person can seek out and apply to that you guys are aware of within the consulting industry, within specific firms or your own firms? And is referral for an opportunity mandatory? I guess the second question is do you have to get referred in, or is it easy just to go on the website and apply? So what are your thoughts on that, Nabil?
My thoughts are that you don't need a referral. I've gone interviews at other firms where I didn't get a referral, just applied. If your application sticks out, that's great. But most firms will host kind of a office tour or some kind of similar networking event. Showing up to that and making a connection, and then submitting your application and saying, hey, I spoke to X person. This is how I learned about the firm, and I know that this is something that I want to do. That I think is a good strategy.
Okay, Faison, sorry about that. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So there's definitely openings. There's always openings. There's always, these companies are always taking interns, and I guess with both Nabil and my background, you can kind of that there's high attrition as well. You know, people don't really stay in consulting for too long. You kind of get this experience and you usually leave within 2 or 3 years, you know, whatever it may be, but there's high attrition. So there's always open roles. Can you seek out and apply? I think honestly, it's really, I hate to use this answer and say it's nuanced, but it really is nuanced. So Nabil said that you can just apply and kind of get through. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who that works for, but I think what school you go to definitely is a heavy dependent on your success in just applying. You know, if you go to a school that's pretty, you know, well known in business and a top school, then your application is going to get looked at if you apply online. But if you kind of go, you know, maybe a state school or maybe a school that doesn't have that much traction, then it's kind of a black hole where it's never going to be seen by anyone, no offense. And that was the case with me. You know, it was, I had to kind of supplement my application by, you know, getting referrals. And is a referral an opportunity mandatory? It's not mandatory, but it helps you tenfold getting this referral. And it's not, you know, when I say reach out to people, it's not just reach out to people and say, hey, can I get a referral? It's, you know, ask them questions, you know, show them, like, giving referrals out to people. It's, you know, everyone that I give a referral out to, everyone that Nabil gives a referral to, Nabil's putting his stamp on, okay, this is a person that I think is, you know, worthy or is competent enough to do this. He's not just going to hand it out to anyone, you know. So that's where it kind of helps to reach out, and you don't have to know the answer to every question, but if you show yourself as someone who's interested, you know, you got to like build that connection with someone and get that, and, you know, kind of get to know them to some extent. But yeah, a referral is, I wouldn't say it's mandatory, but depending on the school, I would say it's mandatory.
Perfect. No, I think that those are really good pieces of advice. And number one, if you are interested in getting into consulting and you want to go for the top firms that are out there, the school you go to matters. So do your research, figure out which are the firms that are recruiting at which schools, and make sure you go to the right school to give yourself the best chance of getting that internship. And then all the other things that we talked about earlier, being proactive, staying involved. Don't just go to school, go to your classes and go home and don't do anything else. You have to be proactive, talk to people, improve your skill sets. One of the things that Faizan mentioned that was very quiet was that he mentioned, it might have been missed, it was that there's this group called Toastmasters. So if you're not the best public speaker, you can join that group and you can practice your public speaking for free. So we highly recommend joining groups like that to improve your skill sets. Nabil mentioned a few organizations like Coursera. There's other websites like Udemy where you can pick up software skills for a very low cost. A college course might cost you a few $1,000s, but some of these courses are free. Some of them are $50, $5, $25. So please be proactive in figuring out what are the right skill sets that make sense for the type of consulting that you want to do. So let's get to the dollar question. Everybody wants to know, how much do consultants make? Is it a lot of, you know, can you guys share the dollar ranges you've seen when people first start, and maybe after 5 years and maybe after 10 years? What are people making in the consulting industry? So I'll start with Nabil first.
Yeah, these salaries are all available on Glassdoor, so you can go, like, there's a website called glassdoor.com if you're not familiar. It basically, people post their salaries across different ranges, and so you can get an idea, or sorry, different careers and different positions, so you can get an idea of like what the career is, or sorry, what the salary is for any given career. Typically, entry-level consultants make like around the 100K mark, a little bit less after bonus. And then essentially the way consulting kind of works is that, like, as you progress further and further, you make a lot more. And then when you hit kind of like the partner level, then you're making significantly more than you made when you first started. But there's obviously, you know, a tough climb to get to that level. So just to give like ranges, I think like when you start, you're making close to the 100K mark within 2-3 years. You progress pretty quickly, so you're making like in the mid 150s range, and then after that, I don't really know because I didn't stick around long enough in consulting because I left after a couple of years. So yeah.
Okay. All right, Faizan.
Yeah, I think Nabil kind of answered the question correctly. I guess if there's a right answer. I mean, it does depend on the type of consulting firm you worked at. Nabil, you worked at Oliver Wyman. It's pretty good firm. but not everyone, some people start off at firms that are maybe tier 3, tier 2, I mean, whatever. People start off at different types of firms. But I think, yeah, on average, it can range from 70, all in from 75, 80 to probably 100, I would say, or maybe a little more if you're at like McKinsey or something like that. But, out of college, you shouldn't really be looking to join, or you shouldn't base your career on the starting salary that you get, because if you're doing that, then you're kind of going to just end up in a career that you hate, but you just maximize your earnings potential for the first year. You should kind of look, try to forecast your life 5 years out, 10 years out, and see, what do I actually enjoy, and what is the intersection of what I enjoy and what's my skill set, because there's a lot of careers where, you maybe don't make as much early on, but, your earnings potential kind of is tenfold down the line. So I would go in with, more of that scope of how can I maximize my earnings potential. And yeah, that's how I'd answer that.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you, guys. That's really good to give people idea. So early on your careers, if you're at some of the accounting firms, depends on the size, the largest firms. Can you guys share names of some of the big firms out there, just so people have an idea of what to target, what to reach out for, where to research this stuff? I'm sure Google search would help, but what are some of the big firms that you guys are familiar with that people should be aware of, and maybe some of the mid-sized firms? So Faison first.
Yeah, sure. So this is all, I would say, your difficulty in working at these firms, or I guess the ease of access in working at these firms, is highly dependent on your school, is what I would say, frankly. Um, at the top tier, you have McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Bain, which are, pretty top firms, and they kind of, work on, I would say, I don't want to say the coolest projects, but the range of projects that they work on is pretty vast. You can be working for a local municipality, like you can be helping Seattle with the homeless, like how they can combat homelessness and danger in their inner city, or you can be helping or a company launch a new product or something like that. So those are, I would say, the top end. If you're at a good school, or if you need kind of like a North Star, and you're dead set on working in consulting, my opinion would be to try to why not shoot for the best that you can. And then there's other firms that are equally as good, equally as prestigious, I would say, whatever that is. Oliver Wyman and EY Parthenon and SN. There's a whole bunch. And then I guess it really just depends on your school. If you're not able to work at McKinsey or something like that fresh out of college, it doesn't mean that you're not going to get the same skill set that someone who works at McKinsey does. You kind of have to see what schools, see what school you're going to, and kind of, I would say the easiest way is to see where alum from that school have gone historically. And all that will tell you is statistically where you have the highest chance of going. That doesn't mean that you can't. That doesn't mean if you go to a school that doesn't have alum working at McKinsey, or doesn't have alum working at Oliver Wyman, that you can't work there. It just means that you're going to be the one who's forging your own path. It's not a path that's already been trodden. And yeah, so I guess I would say like the Big Four is a good place for a lot of people to enter into consulting. It's relatively, the barrier isn't as high, I would say, as McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group or Bain. So that's a good starting place. There's places like Accenture as well. Accenture is solid. Yeah, that's
Perfect. No, I think that's really helpful. Nabil, you want to add anything to that in terms of names of consulting firms to target towards?
I think that covers it. Like, one point that I would just make is that if you want to be in consulting, I would, the tiers definitely matter. Like, I think like you should gun, why not gun for the best guys? They're called MBB, McKinsey, Bain, BCG. So definitely gun for them. But if you don't end up in that spot, like being in the realm of like the consulting industry, like Faison mentioned, that there's so much attrition, there's so many people going in and out of the industry. All of these firms are looking to hire. And so I know a lot of people who started at Oliver Wyman, went to McKinsey, BCG, Bain, started at EY or Deloitte and so on, went to MBB. And then when they got more senior at the MBB level and they wanted to make partner and make more money, they went back down to like, not down, but like went to like the other firms. So it moves in all these different directions. If you want to do the job, you're going to get to do the job within any of these different firms that Faison mentioned. And if you also look at like exit opportunities, at least in tech, which I can speak to because I work at a tech firm now, there are people who come from Accenture, that come from EY, KPMG, and from MBB plus Oliver Wyman, and they kind of are doing the same thing. They just have different skill sets because they've worked on different types of projects and they do different things, but each have found their niche afterwards too. So I think that like it's more of like a marginal difference at the end of the day after you've exited, after you're like doing your next thing, than what it feels like when you're actually first joining. So I think the firm matters less is all I'm trying to say.
Perfect. No, I think that's very helpful. We did have a few people share some comments. I'll just throw it out there. So Mohammed shared that in Germany, he's seen entry-level consultants start about 70,000 years, which isn't significantly unusual from the ranges that I've seen, that you guys have seen. And then Miriam shared that she is seeing that large consulting firms start 75,000, and within 2 to 3 years, you can go up to $100,000. And that's also consistent with what I've seen. And like you guys said before, it'll just vary depending on your skill, like what firm you start out with. Some firms pay higher starting wages than other firms. From like long-term career path, I think, Nabil, you started on this topic. Where do people go in consulting? What's the route? How do you can you do consulting for 10, 15, 20 years until you retire? I know very few people that have done that. What are the routes out? You mentioned careers going into technology, and Faizan, you went into investment banking. Can each of you kind of share what you've seen as the kind of like the next step after consulting or as part of consulting? So Faizan, do you want to start first?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, everything the way that I'm going to answer this question is obviously my opinion and my experience. I understand that can be different for other people, but what I've noticed is people who go into consulting, they kind of go into it because they kind of don't know exactly what function or what type of job they want. And working in consulting allows you to, work across many different industries. You're not kind of siloed only to I guess certain firms do silo you early on, but by and large, you're usually industry agnostic. So you're working, one project can be consumer retail, another project can be telecom, another project can be pharmaceutical. So it kind of gives you this range of experiences, and you're working on what I'm doing, what do I not enjoy out of doing, and it kind of helps you narrow down what you want to do. Careers, I mean, you can stay in consulting for your whole life if you want to, but generally I feel like the trend is to kind of get the experience and go, whether it's a technology company, usually it's tech is a very desirable place to go because there's a term called rest invest, where you get stock and you kind of just rest on it until it vests. And what I'm trying to say is the work-life balance is better. But yeah, you can kind of take it as you want. You can use this experience and kind of shape it into many different exit opportunities, and hopefully, you can shape it into what you really want to do. I've seen people go into, tech as product managers. I've seen people go into, even private equity as investors. So it really just depends on what you're trying to do. And if you have that scope of what you want to do earlier on while you're working in consulting, I think it serves you better because you can seek out projects that are kind of, building upon that skill set, because there's so many different types of projects.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Nabil, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can talk about like typical exits that I've seen, but they're all across the board. There are people who exit not just to like the private sector. Some people go work in government after they go back to school, and having consulting experience can help you get into a law school or like an MBA program. So across the board, there are a lot of different things that you can do. I guess like the theme is that essentially like these organizations are looking for people who cracked into a job that's difficult to get into, and so that helps you with like applications and getting into new roles. And also you just develop certain skills in consulting. It's a pretty rigorous career. Like it's by no means like a walk in the park, like pretty long hours, pretty high standards and caliber for like the work that you have to output. And so it develops a certain kind of like skill set that is valuable at different places. So the common exits that I've seen are within tech, like Faizan mentioned, seems to be a desirable place. Like after you do like rigorous consulting, it's better to get some good work-life balance in tech. exits into finance, so into investment banking and into private equity, which is a little bit more difficult coming from a consulting background, because consulting sometimes can be a little operational versus like what those roles are looking for. Those are the common ones I've seen, and the other ones are like going back to school. I can speak specifically about tech and what the value of consulting is there, because I made that exit and I'm very familiar with working with other people from consulting who've gone into tech. So the value, especially at like a start. So I work at a Series D funded startup, and the value really there is that like as these companies are scaling, they're looking for people with diverse skill sets who can own and manage certain areas of work. In consulting, the focus really much is on ownership and taking leadership over specific areas and driving that. And that kind of skill set is really valued in tech, especially in startups that are growing, because there is so much ambiguity, and a consultant's job is oftentimes problem solving, creating order out of ambiguity, and then determining what to do about it. So at a startup, really valuable, but other people that I've known in tech have gone to like the larger companies like Facebook, Google, so on, and working in strategy there, or sometimes working in product roles as well.
Okay, perfect. I think that was really helpful. So we learned a little bit about what are the basics of advisory. We talked about some advice for how to do it well and how to get into the industry and some things you can do to get ahead. We talked about internships. We talked about pay. I think you guys have implied, and we talked about travel, what the travel's like. It can be excessive depending on the type of job you are on, but it'll vary depending on project to project. And then we talked a little bit about the career paths post consulting. Once you leave those consulting firms, what are some of the options that are out there? I would say in terms of hours, you guys have hinted at this, but the hours can vary significantly week to week, project to project, and they can be pretty excessive as well, 60, 80, 90 hours work weeks. Now that we have about 6 minutes left, I wanted to make sure I remind the audience, this is your time. Please ask questions. Our goal is to be here to provide answers to some of the questions that we can't answer. So please ask your questions now in the remaining time we have left. And what I like to do is turn it over to each of you. I know I've been kind of bossing you guys around and asking specific questions, but if there's something you guys each want to talk about to people who are in college, people in high school, young professionals who just graduated, started the field, maybe some people are doing their first internship in consulting right now this summer and are listening in, what is the advice that you have for them? So I'll start it off with Nabil first.
Yeah, I mentioned this a bit before, but I would say, and I'm definitely biased because I come from an engineering background, but I would say studying and learning how to code is really valuable. And so I went into Oliver Wyman, which is like a general management consulting firm that does, a variety of projects in strategy and analytics and operations and so on. And having like a bit of a coding background in engineering, I didn't really, a lot of my class went into software engineering, but that's not something that I wanted to do. But having that in my toolkit and knowing how to code, in Python, in SQL, and C++, like having that knowledge, once I got into Oliver Wyman, I noticed, and I didn't even know this before I joined, but there were a lot of projects that had a significant coding component. So I didn't even know that I like doing that type of work, but it was almost kind of like looped into that. And because I had it in my toolkit, I used it. And so it proved being like, I ended up finding my niche doing that because one, I found the work interesting, but two, it's kind of like using that technical acumen and then using that to do sophisticated analysis and then determining what the strategy and the business insight is from that. And having just the business insight is one part of things. Having just the technical background is another. But if you can kind of like have both, you become more desirable in the workplace. I would say that helped me, get my next career, which is in tech now. So I would say like having that coding knowledge, it never goes to waste. You have it in your back pocket. It comes out in different ways that you don't anticipate. And so I would say studying how to code is really helpful.
Perfect. Thank you. And Faizan, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I think my advice would just be speak to as many people as you can. If there's something in the back of your mind that, is even a tertiary thought of something that you might be interested in, reach out to someone who works in that field. And I think this advice can apply to people who are interning currently, people who are looking for jobs, people who are, students. you don't know what you want to do until you do it. And even then, a lot of times you still don't know what you want to do. So the easiest way to bridge that gap is to reach out to people, because what better resource do you have than that first person point of view of someone who already has worked in that field? And I don't know, it's just, you have nothing to lose reaching out to people. You know, I would say that the most valuable thing you can do is getting a LinkedIn premium, just so that you can endlessly stalk people in different fields and kind of just send them emails and, you know, pick their brain. Because the biggest challenge that I've seen with people who, you know, reach out to me about advice is that, you know, oh, I'm kind of interested in this, but I'm also interested in this. Like, what do you think I should do? Like, I don't know. What do you think? You know, like, why don't you ask someone who has done that? Why don't you ask someone who works in these fields? And, you know, no one is going to make these decisions for you. No one is going to, you know, put on your shoes and think with your own brain. That's something that only you can do. And so the biggest advice I would say is reach out to as many people as you can and kind of use all these conversations as data points in order for you to make your own decision. Because ultimately, you know, one person can have a specific path, and, you know, you might think this is the only path that I can take in order for me to get there, but that's not true. You can create your own path. And so, yeah, reach out to as many people as you can, and, you know, you're creating your own path, and all these serve as data points in order for you to make your own decision.
No, that's really good advice, guys. So we have about 2 minutes left. Again, I wanted to make sure the audience had opportunity to ask questions so we could address them. In terms of my closing thoughts, what I would say is, I think you guys have probably learned a lot. We could have if we just took Nabil or Faizan, we could talk for 2 hours just about their projects they've worked on, the nuances. The concept for today's session was just to give you guys a high level of what is consulting, what are the basics, how to get into it, what are some tips, and then a little bit about what each of their respective consulting fields and experience has been like. We do have a Muslim Youth Mentors Gmail address, so muslimyouthmentors@gmail.com. If you email us, we can forward your emails to Nabil or Faizan, and if they feel like they're relevant and they can respond, they will do so, hopefully. I'm speaking for them right now. But and then you can always reach out to them on LinkedIn. Doesn't mean they're going to accept your invitation if they have no reference. So please include like a nice note of who you are, why you're reaching out, etc. I know I always look at those notes, and that's helpful for me to figure out who this person is that's reaching out to me. And then the other tips I would have is be proactive. A lot of people give up when they're applying for jobs. No one's getting back to them right away. Sometimes, like Faizan said, it's good to speak with people and figure out, what are you doing wrong? Have you had somebody look at your resume? Has a career office at your college looked at your resume? Is there something wrong with your resume? Is it in the right shape that it needs to be for the types of jobs that you're applying to? Those are some other tips. And the other tips I would say is be proactive in applying to jobs. Make that your full-time job if you're looking for work. And then the other thing is going to career fairs. A lot of them are virtual, but they're becoming more in person now as things calm down and vaccine rates go up. So you have to be proactive. Nobody's going to give a job to you. And it's not always that it's racism. Look, I'm brown, or I'm black, or I'm a person of color. No one's going to call me. My dad is not a partner at a firm. No one's going to call me. No one's going to give me a job. That negativity doesn't help. You have to speak to people, figure out what's going on. What can you do to improve your opportunities? And one of the best opportunities, if you're already graduated, is going back for that master's and using that time wisely to seek out another chance for on-campus recruiting to be hired. So with that, we're at our time, 6:30. So I wanted to thank Nabil, Faizan, Masjid, Hamza for allowing us to have this event. It's going to be recorded and stay up here. And thank you to everybody for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum.